Thank you for attending our panel on digital marketing to children, and thank you to Children in Screens for hosting this panel. My name is Jennifer Harris. I'm with the Rudd Center for Food Policy and Health, and my research focuses on food marketing to children and its impact on their health. So today, I'm very fortunate to be able to moderate this panel. So I'm going to be asking questions and not doing most of the talking. But I would like to, before we start hear from our incredible panel, I'd like to ask a few questions of the audience. So let me see. All right, so how many of you have children living in your household who are under 18? Can you raise your hands? Okay, and how many of those of you have children who use a mobile device to go online? Okay, okay, keep your hands up if you do. So actually not very many, I'm surprised, but so how many of you think you have a pretty good idea of what kinds of sites and apps that your child uses when they're online? Okay, most of you. And do you think you have a pretty good idea of the types of marketing that they're exposed to on those sites? No. Okay, no one. Yeah. Well, I thought this one person who probably, but I thought this audience would be a little bit less representative of the rest of the country, but you actually are because when we talk to parents and as well as educators and healthcare providers, and we show them examples of what marketing is going online, they had no idea. And so what I thought we could do, well, today my goal really for this session is to increase awareness about how companies target kids online and why it raises so many concerns about their health and well-being. And the other thing is that there aren't a lot of researchers in the US who study digital marketing. And so I really hope to encourage some of you to consider marketing and commercial influence in the many different issues that you study in your own research. So, my panel of experts does know a lot about this topic, and so I asked them to start by just sharing a few examples of some of the kinds of marketing that they found that kids are seeing online. So I'm going to start with Dr. Jenny Radesky, and if you could also just say a couple sentences about yourself, introduce yourself, and
thanks. So. I am Jenny Radesky. I'm a developmental behavioral pediatrician and media researcher at University of Michigan. I work a lot on tracking the devices of young kids and their parents. And so one of the things we have found was that YouTube was one of the favorite, most popular, and longest running apps on the smartphones and tablets of kids ages kind of 2 to 5. So my lab has done a lot of deep dives into YouTube content analyses. We've worked with Common Sense Media to collect the viewing histories of a couple hundred kids and watched all the videos that they had watched and code them for things like educational quality or branded placement. So most of my interest in marketing has come out of studying YouTube because YouTube is this big marketing machine. I mean, it basically is the backbone of how a lot of these free platforms run. And the more time spent on these platforms, the more ad impressions the channels or content creators can get. And then they can also produce their own toys or branded merch and persuade viewers to get that as well. So I'm just showing a few examples of the way the YouTube interface allows, easy click-through for if you search for Cocomelon, you get, a few ads on top that just reduces the friction for a child who's interested in this topic. And, even though this was a surprise to me because I was just looking for videos and I got merchandise. So that's one example, reduced friction, increased click-through, and likelihood of purchase. What we also found is that even if it's not a brand placing their products in a YouTube video, we found that content creators seem to be putting a lot of branded toys, candy, food, fast food, favorite branded characters like Elsa, because that generates engagement amongst young kids. And it seems like if the incentive for a content creator is to make a video that's going to trend and therefore get a lot of views and a lot more ad impressions, they're going to go to the lowest common denominator, the kind of highly refined pleasure that's going to make kids want to click through and have a hard time resisting clicking. So throughout, about half of the 1,500 videos that we watched for this study had some sort of branded or commercial product in it. I just love that photo of a child just chomping down on a huge, ginormous piece of chocolate, because it's all this wish fulfillment that we saw that doesn't show up in traditionally produced content that we might have watched on Saturday morning cartoons and as kids. And then the last thing we've been doing is now trying to look at the recommendations feeds on YouTube, because this is a decision point for kids. This is where a content creator is trying to influence your decision on a click-through and to engage with their product. And so there's lots of use of candy, chocolate, there's lots of other heuristics going on here of like, ooh, there's something a little sexy about that, there's something scary about that. So these are just examples that go from fast food to candy to branded horror characters that, again, like elicit a little bit of that, oh my gosh, what is that? I need to click that. And then I just loved this ad that I got from one of them. I was doing a search for Mr. Beast, and I got your AI girlfriend. So you can, which is just another ad, which I don't know how much that was targeted based on someone who loves Mr. Beast, maybe is a boy and would love an AI chatbot who's pretty to talk to them. So those are my 3 examples of the ways we're seeing brands show up with kids. And are we just going down the line, Jennifer?
Josh.
Okay.
So my name is Josh Golin. I'm the executive director of Fair Play. We are an advocacy group that works to protect children from harmful marketing. And in recent years, that's really included a lot of work on how online platforms are designed for the benefit of advertisers, often at the detriment of kids. And one of the examples that I wanted to show is from Musical.ly. This is from a few years ago. Musical.ly is the app that became TikTok in 2019. And it started as an app where you lip-synced videos. So you made videos of yourself lip-syncing to a song. It was becoming incredibly popular. And like many apps that become incredibly popular and they're not exactly sure how they're going to monetize it, they turned to new forms of advertising. And so one of the things that they had was... Break me off a piece of that. Was they had kids lip sync to a Kit Kat jingle, which you just started hearing, and I guess we'll hear the rest of that, or maybe not. But anyway, you get the idea from what you just heard. So it's this idea that kids would make videos of themselves lip syncing a commercial jingle. And so what I'd like you to think about is, what Jenny just talked about is what I think we think of more when we think about influencer marketing. We think about YouTube creators or other people on social media becoming very popular to the point where brands take an interest in them and start paying them in order to promote their products. What you had on Musical.ly is kids for absolutely no money making jingles about a candy bar on their, as a way of participating in TikTok or Musical.ly at the time. And one of the things that happens is when Kit Kat is paying Musical.ly for this, one of the things they're paying for is that if you upload your video where you're lip syncing a commercial jingle, it's getting amplified more. The algorithm is showing that to more people. And so kids are very savvy when they're on these platforms, and what they are taught about these platforms is that the most important thing is to be visible, is to be shared, is to go viral. And so they understand that participating in a branded contest or a branded challenge like this is a great way to promote yourself, to get yourself out there, to be successful at social media. This is a challenge. I can't read from where I'm sitting maybe it doesn't say actually, but it got about 20 million views. This was in 2017, and this is a more...
Can you play the video in the back or play the... No?
It's
Break me off a piece of that Kit Kat boy. We're both Chance the Rapper.
No, I get it.
Break me off a piece of that Kit Kat boy.
So this was an early example of marketing on TikTok's predecessor. This got about 60 million views total for this campaign. A more recent one is a Pepsi challenge that was just done in a handful of countries. It resulted in 500,000 submissions and over 3 billion video views. So again, this is changing children's experience of what it's to be online. It's commercializing their friendships, right? So part of what you're doing is you are posting content that gets shown to your friends that says, I loved Pepsi or I love Kit Kats. And so it's not just about being exposed to marketing, it is about actually participating in the marketing, making yourself a marketer, and the brand's getting all of this work for free. And so that's a very new form of marketing and something that I think that perhaps maybe people are not aware of. And I'll pass it to John.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. There we are. My name's John Patrick Allum. I'm associate professor in the School of Public Health at Rutgers University. I'm also associate professor in the School of Medicine at Rutgers, formerly associate professor at the University of Southern California, and the director of the Social Media Analytics Lab, which was a group of individuals focused on content from social media platforms and how that content can impact the well-being of adolescents and young adults. My research that I'm going to talk about today is largely in the tobacco context, and this first slide here is a music video featuring Justin Bieber, among other prominent artists, where in the video itself had product placement from an organization called Candy Pens, which is a electronic cigarette device. This video kind of precipitated a thoughtful amount of research from my lab, looking at the impact of this product placement on young people and its ability to move individuals who were not interested in using these products to, we call it susceptibility, to making them susceptible in experimental designs. I'm hoping that the video plays. It's just very brief.
I'm the one early morning in the dawn. Know you wanna ride now. I'm the one, yeah.
So there's multiple instances throughout the video of product placement where you get to see the branding, get to see the product itself, and then this video received 1 billion views in a short amount of time, and then it was watched repeatedly over the years as we tracked it, so it got up to quite over 1 billion, and that's 1 billion with a B, so it's a lot of views. And what we were able to tease out was that, in fact, videos with this kind of product placement in an experimental setting, compared to videos without it, actually moved individuals from not being interested into e-cigarettes or this vaping device to being interested in it. So not only is the video is being viewed a lot, but it does do what it's intended to do, maybe unsurprisingly. Another example of the work that we do is looking at content on Instagram, again, in this vaping context. So similar to what we've been discussing already on this panel, it's a young person kind of talking about what they're doing and a vendor using that in order to raise brand awareness, or in this case, a service awareness. That's a pretty young-looking person to be using a tobacco product or a cannabis product or any kind of vaping product, in my opinion. We're also looking at the impact of cartoons. So cartoons have a legal definition. We use that legal definition to differentiate between cartoons and non-cartoon images. And what we found in my lab is that electronic cigarette companies and vendors are using cartoon images as logos and as other kind of branding to increase the appeal of their products. And in fact, that, similar to what I described in the music video case, that in cartoons, it drives interest in this product too, especially among high school students. I'm based in the Southern California area, and when we look at thousands of young students in high school, and run experiments with using this kind of branding, it does move the needle, also maybe unsurprisingly. So that's what the research that we've been working on in part over the last few years.
Thank you. That e-cigarette video was really subtle. I could barely see the brand. My name is Marie Bragg, and I'm an assistant professor at the NYU School of Medicine in the Department of Population Health, with an appointment also with the NYU Stern School of Business in the marketing department. And I'm the director of diversity initiatives in the Office of Science and Research at the School of Medicine. So a lot of my work has focused on health equity, and specifically in marketing, on targeted marketing. So you can see, and shout out to Zora Hall from my team who identified these. One of the things I love about working with NYU students and young people is they're so much cooler than me, so they can give me great content that would take me 100 years to find. And they sort of keep me up on current trends. So these two examples that Zora found were two celebrities, Travis Scott and Saweetie, who are both popular American rappers. And one of the interesting things that our lab talks about is how fast food companies will just take a regular product and just sort of rebrand it as like Saweetie sauce or something like that. It's just their regular like barbecue sauce or sweet and sour sauce. And sometimes when they do this, there are lines around the block for the product. McDonald's is selling out of things. And so you can see sort of the impact on sales here that's mentioned. This one was so fascinating. And we were just talking to some colleagues at the Federal Trade Commission about it because Doja Cat is another popular American rapper. And was hired to post a jingle on TikTok, and they're supposed to disclose it. But what was interesting about this song that she performed was she disclosed it in the post prior to the jingle. And it was interesting because she was almost embarrassed. So you see her, she's lying back in bed, and she's like, I have to tell you guys, I have to do this thing. It's called a jingle. I hate the word jingle. It's for Taco Bell. So when you see it, just know that it's a contract that I'm fulfilling or something like that. And so you should watch it. It's really interesting. But so I was sort of surprised that it was a little bit, it seemed a little bit of disinterest in there. But the fascinating thing was that disclosure video got a couple million views, but the one that was actually the video of her rapping, which had no disclosure in it, got 3 times as many views. So it's sort of like the warning to people or the disclosure to people was separated from the actual ad itself. And so she disclosed it, but it was separate, and I found that particularly fascinating as well. And we see other examples of it too. So there's all this sort of music and artistry infused with the product in a way that, as many of my colleagues have said, blurs the line between entertainment and branding. And I want to emphasize that targeted marketing can be a really good thing. We want inclusivity in ads. We want people to be represented and featured. That's really exciting. My family's from Trinidad. At any time, like, the Olympics are on and we see the Trini flag, everyone starts screaming. Like, I was born in Florida. I'm not, but it's sort of that cultural pride that comes with sort of seeing your community represented. And so targeted marketing can be a really good thing. The challenge is when targeted marketing occurs in ways that promote products that are associated with the development of diet-related diseases among communities who already experience high rates of diet-related disease.
Okay. Thanks. So maybe you all learned a little bit something new from that. So now I'm going to, I have a few questions for the panel, and and at the end, I'm hoping we'll have about 10 minutes for questions, so we'll save the questions to the end. So researchers and advocates have found many, many examples of digital marketing that's targeted to youth that promotes harmful products. We saw unhealthy food and tobacco ads, and they're seeing ads for alcohol, gambling, steroids, firearms, tanning beds, extreme dieting products, and many more. But I'd like to hear my panel's perspectives on what are other reasons that we worry about digital marketing to kids, why it raises red flags, and if there's certain characteristics of digital marketing that could make it even more harmful than other traditional forms of marketing. So, John, do you want to start?
Sure, thank you. One of the things that sticks out in my mind is, most young people or most of us in general are getting our digital marketing through our smartphones, which we're on often, and it could be the case that a young person starts and stops its day or their day with a smartphone and exposure to these marketing campaigns as well as all the other content. So the thing that sticks out to me is this constant, chronic exposure that is arguably unique compared to other generations. So that's definitely something that raises a concern for me.
Yeah, and I think along with that, people, parents don't know what their kids are seeing online, when in the old days, when the television was on, they could see the marketing that their kids are seeing. So thanks, John. Josh?
I think, outside of the products being marketed through digital marketing, there's two major concerns that I have. The first is that, while traditional television advertising was always built around exploiting children's developmental vulnerabilities. So if you want to advertise to a 9-year-old, you put a 13-year-old in a commercial because kids emulate their older peers. If you're advertising to adolescents, you emphasize things like social acceptance, and this product is going to make you cool and help you sit at the right table in the cafeteria. So there's always been that sort of developmental exploitation in advertising to kids, but digital advertising allows you to exploit an individual's developmental vulnerabilities, and that's different. So for instance, researchers have been able to show that on Facebook and Instagram, you can target ads to adolescents based on their interest in partying or tobacco or gambling, right, or dieting. So that's extremely concerning. But it goes beyond that. So for instance, in 2017, a memo was leaked from Facebook where they were bragging to advertisers that they could advertise to adolescents at the exact moment that they were feeling bad about themselves, including when they were feeling bad about their bodies. And I think there's all sorts of really horrible use cases that we can think about there, like do we want people, advertisers to have the ability to advertise weapons to people when they're feeling angry? Do we want to have, the ability to advertise diet pills when you're feeling bad about your body? But I think even beyond that, just the idea that all of this information is being collected and these profiles are being built on all of us, and the idea that they can have a sense of how we're feeling at a given moment, do we want advertisers to target to understand that when a kid is in a certain mood, when they're feeling anxious, they are more likely to buy stuff. They're more likely to click on ads. And that's the information that they have now and that they can use to target their marketing. So I think that's a new concern that is extremely troubling and something that we need to regulate. The other thing that I would say is that, as John alluded to, the platforms, our kids are spending many of them are spending the majority of their waking hours on platforms that were designed for advertising and not necessarily designed for their benefit. So that means they're on platforms that are collecting a tremendous amount of data on them. One industry study shows that advertisers have 72 million data points on a child by the time they turn age 13, even though we have a law that is supposed to make it impossible for these sites to collect that kind of information on young people, advertisers to collect that kind of information on young people. But thinking also about how these platforms are designed to be addictive, they're designed to be encourage compulsive use. That is for the benefit of advertisers. Think about some of the features that we have on these platforms. Think about the like button. The like button was developed in order to help advertisers understand what people's preferences were. It also turned out it was an incredible motivator to get people to be online more often, because people want to collect likes and they want to see how people have reacted to their posts. That has changed the experience of young people online. So there's all sorts of conventions and rules about how quickly you have to like your friends' post when they post something on Instagram. There is all sorts of conventions about what you need to look like in your picture on Instagram in order to collect more likes. The like button was not developed in order to maximize the pleasure or the experience of young people. It was developed in order to help advertisers. And so when we think about things like FOMO and compulsive use, those are actually advertising-created problems. And so, I think the way that these platforms are able to shape a user's experience for the benefit of advertisers is something that's also new with digital marketing.
Okay, thank you. Marie.
I'll build off of the targeted marketing theme that I was discussing. And one thing that I always like to share as a reminder that sort of the disproportionate targeting is on purpose comes from a quote from the position, this was quoted in 2009, and the position at the time was called Coca-Cola's Senior Vice President of African American Marketing, and she's being interviewed by somebody from an advertising trade journal. And so the whole interview is about like, how are your campaigns doing? But there's this really powerful quote where the Vice President of African American Marketing says, we perceive black adolescents to be trendsetters in the United States, and so it's really important for us to reach them. And the implication being, if black adolescents adopt something as cool, it gets disseminated out to everybody else. And then they also said, we over-index in single-family households, so reaching black mom is critical. And so this really ties into the idea of a company like Coca-Cola. We know consumption is associated with the development of diet-related diseases like diabetes. And so we have the company sort of boasting about their ability to target black youth and single black mothers with their product in a way that she then goes on to say builds loyalty and builds share. So basically, we get these really loyal consumers, we build a lot of share, and so it's not just that there's some targeting to white adolescents, Latinx adolescents, and black adolescents. There is a very purposeful targeting, particularly of black adolescents by the companies for very particular reasons. They know they're doing it. They're happy to boast about it. And that's something that's concerning to me when it's promoting these health-harming products.
Thanks, Marie. Jenny, do you want to wrap up?
Yeah, I think the difference with digital marketing, I'll just tie this to the dual process model of how children process advertising, and that this is a framework. We talked about it in our AAP Digital Advertising to Children report that talks about how, when a child encounters an ad, whether it's on TV or it's on their smartphone, there's a logical cognitive process of how they're analyzing the content or the delivery of that information, and then there's more of an emotional process. And so there's in examples that are older, like advert games, where you're linking exposure of an advertisement, say for a sugar cereal, to a little online game where you have rewards and a kind of emotionally or pleasure-driven responses, you are more likely to have a child like that brand or associate that brand with something positive because they've had this more emotional process activated. So it's kind of similar to the fast brain, slow brain sort of response that you have this fast brain processing that's more reliant on heuristics, more reliant on your kind of reflexive cognitive biases. And that's where what we're seeing in what we're analyzing on YouTube and other platforms is that we really see a lot of I wouldn't say targeting, but kind of leveraging that more emotional aspect of how kids would process advertising. So that happens through parasocial relationships, that if you trust this character, you love this YouTuber, you love strawberry shortcake, you're gonna be more likely to listen to her if she says to make an in-app purchase. If you love Vlad and Nikki because they are these buddies that you watch on YouTube all the time, you're more likely to want to buy their toys. So that sort of trust and kind of more magical thinking that young kids have about their relationships with media characters is one way that you can be more activating that more emotional aspect of responding to advertising and drive kids to want that brand or product more. The other way that we're seeing some of these heuristics be tapped into, through our analysis of YouTube with Common Sense Media last year, that was mostly based on trying to identify the racial and ethnic representation of YouTubers and characters appearing in YouTube. We were also trying to analyze what sort of stereotypes appeared in YouTube. Unscripted vloggers, people who just pick up their phone and just, say whatever. And noticing that people often included gender stereotypes or racial or ethnic stereotypes. Gender was about 20%, racial ethnic was 9%. But a good proportion of videos that we kind of wondered whether tapping into this like humor, this little bit of your heuristic bias, how they try to get more engagement through some of these more fringy types of statements that they might make. So there's heuristics in both the humor and the storytelling that occurs within a video, and then as I showed before on the thumbnails, when you're trying to invite click-through and engagement with a video, we've described a lot of those different impulses, the way you just react based on seeing something. And it could just be the bright, loud colors, the visual loudness of that picture that kind of draws you to it, the amount of manufactured drama. There are all of these thumbnails that are like this versus this, and oh my God, all these faces of people being like, oh. And so, and all of this excess lavish stuff, coins, money, candy, food. And then also the kind of creepy bizarre. We found a lot with Roblox, when we use search terms like Roblox or Minecraft or Flamingo or some of these other popular YouTubers who really kind of engage through that kind of I can't look away sort of heuristic. And why is that a problem? Because heuristics are the things we're not conscious of about our biases, right? So if you have short form video where you're like, oh, this kid clicked on that, and they like that, and they like that, whew, you can really tap into some of these psychological profiles about kids to recognize some of their potential vulnerabilities. And so I think that that's important for us to think about, is how can engagement, even with content, especially very heuristic driven content, maybe it's not for selling a brand in that moment, but it might be for the purposes of creating a very effective marketing profile that then later helps with serving other branded content.
Okay, thanks. Well, that was a lot of scary stuff, but so my next question is, I'm curious if any of our panel members have seen positive developments in online marketing to kids. If there are any marketing practices that you think are beneficial, and then also what kinds of actions are happening in government policies and interventions and that sort of thing that might help protect children from online marketing. So, I don't know, Jenny.
I'll start with, because I do think that there are mission-driven brands that do marketing campaigns like the Dove campaigns that are specifically trying to promote body positivity's new, definitions of beauty, new definitions of representation. Those are not child-targeted, but they are, children encounter them. Children see them, and then they see their caregiver's response to them. So I do think that there are some positive developments in that regard, that when marketers are specifically trying to address a social cause through their creative process. But I also think that I've never seen that directed to children. What I have seen in some of these YouTubers that we've analyzed and we've showed kids some of them, is they appreciate it when a YouTuber like Doja Cat will be like, hey, behind the scenes, this is what's really going on. Most of them don't do that. A couple of them will do it as outtakes at the end, and that helps kids see behind the scenes and be like, this is all constructed, this is all a story. That I think probably works better than a written disclosure, but there's no experimental evidence to actually show that. I just see that as an area of promise that YouTubers could be more transparent.
Thanks, Marie.
Well, and there is evidence that sometimes when people see the disclosures, instead of it making people cautious about the product, they think, oh, wow, how cool that this person is so transparent.
No.
And also how cool that they're getting paid money to do this thing. And one of the panels that I was on with Children and Screens quoted that in the 60s, most kids wanted, the number one job choice was to become an astronaut when you got older. And now the number one job choice among kids is to be an influencer when they grow up, which is horrifying. But then I see how much money they make, and I'm like, it makes sense that they want to do that. I think that the only sort of one of the positive things I've seen in some ads is this proliferation of inclusivity in ways that are sort of not even part of the plot line. I think that's really important. And including my colleague Omni Cassidy at NYU is interested in sort of people who she describes as perhaps belonging to multiple racial ethnic groups, or somebody who could be perceived as like South Asian or Hispanic, or a combination of different cultural backgrounds. And that, I think, is a really good thing, so that you can see the real wide range of diversity of people represented in ads. The sort of flip side of the coin is that idea that we're sort of reaching more people with more junk, and so it's, I love the idea of inclusivity in the ads, and if we could just get the junk food companies to promote healthy stuff, it would be sort of a nice win-win. So if anybody's got a direct line to all these companies, please let us know.
Thanks. So, Josh, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what's going on in the policy world.
Yeah, so I think for me, I would say I haven't seen anything good coming out of the advertisers, but I think what's exciting about this moment is the policy and regulatory opportunities. So we have one law that addresses marketing online to children, the Children's Online Privacy and Protection Act, which was passed in 1998 before smartphones and YouTube and Facebook and Google existed, and that law only covers kids up until their 13th birthday, and it is primarily a notice and consent law, which means that if you get parental permission, you can basically do whatever you want with a child's data. So it is a law that is desperately in need of updating, and there is an update called the Children and Teen Online Privacy and Protection Act, which would do a number of really important things when it comes to marketing to children. First of all, it would expand privacy protections to teens for the first time, and give them special privacy protections, some control over their data, limit data collection from teens that is obviously used both to keep them online longer and to market to them. But I think even better is that it would ban data-driven personalized marketing to all children under the age of 17. That, I think, would be an enormous step towards protecting kids from commercial exploitation. I also think it is one of the most important things we can do to change how these platforms are designed, because as you know, as we've been saying on this panel, the collection of data is not just used to fuel the marketing, but also to drive kids to certain types of content and to keep them online longer. The other positive development is actually from 8 days ago. So my organization, along with others, has been pushing the Federal Trade Commission for years that when it comes to influencer marketing, or when it comes to advertising that is embedded in content, so it's not clearly separated from programming, that disclosures are not enough. That, in fact, they're completely ineffective on children, as Marie mentioned a minute ago. And so the policy of the Federal Trade Commission for years has just been that you have to disclose if you're doing influencer marketing or if you're doing product placement. Last week, they issued staff guidance that said you should actually not do any kind of hidden advertising to children, any kind of influencer marketing. They didn't expressly prohibit it, but they suggested that it's a really bad idea to do it, and that it could lead to enforcement actions against companies that are doing influencer marketing. So that's a major step in the right direction, and something, a positive development.
Okay, thanks. And John, you had a few ideas about tobacco advertising.
Yeah, so a lot of our work in my lab is focused on, reining in companies from marketing to kids. And these companies often don't want to comply and want to push back. So a necessary thing to do is use the judiciary system to enforce compliance and enact punishments. So one of the things that I was fortunate enough to do and continue to do is work with district attorneys and attorneys general to enforce compliance on some of the companies and who are promoting to children. The video that I shared earlier was from a relatively small company called Candy Pens. It was good to start small, at least for me as at the time, a junior faculty member, now getting ready to be deposed and be criticized and all of those things. If many of you are academics, that wasn't really part of the training. So it was good to start small. This year I was deposed by TikTok, which is a lot bigger, and for 6 hours to be criticized. And it's a lot different than going to a faculty meeting where everyone does the sandwich compliment or something like that. So it was a good learning experience to start small with Candy Pens in Los Angeles. But the positive development was that the district attorney was motivated enough to use the data from our lab, which was threefold. It was content analysis, demonstrating the videos and the product placement, showing that young people, especially minors, so those who are not legally allowed to buy these products, were exposed to these videos and interested in the products. And then, like I mentioned earlier, the experiments saying that the product placement works to drive susceptibility. And so Candy Pens is no longer, and this extends out to all tobacco companies and vaping companies, to do product placement in music videos. Now, again, I was fortunate. I live in Los Angeles. My career is mostly taking place in Los Angeles, where most of this content is done. So working with the local attorney general in this case, or a district attorney in this case, had national implications, which we were quite proud of. But that is a positive development, and I think the message is that academics aren't necessarily trained or positioned to work with the judiciary system, but in this context, I think it is very important, and it does require a little bit of extra energy and effort. But there are collaborations to be made, and you can have small wins. Like, granted, there's still a lot of vaping use, and there's other forms of marketing and problematic content, as this panel demonstrates quite well. But it is something that I look at and go, it's a constellation of variables that drive problematic use of certain products and services, and we're just trying to pick away at it to make incremental change in hopes to someday make a larger change. But I do take a lot of I take positive feelings away from these experiences.
Well, thank you. I want to have enough time for questions, so I'd just like to wrap up and ask the panel, what's one thing that you would recommend to researchers or to parents or healthcare providers to help them protect children from harmful marketing online? So why don't we start with you, John?
Okay, so given the earlier poll about their parents and their knowledge of their children's content, that was, if you raised your hand and says you know what your kid's doing online, that's probably inaccurate. If we're measuring it, there's going to be a lot of variability in that measurement error there. Because your experience online is through an app or through a program is quite distinct from your child's as a result of all the rules and algorithms dictating content. And so one of the decisions parents make is they go online, they go on an app or their iPhone, or even if they have the parental linking to their child's phone, and they go, I'm going to allow my child to look at content or apps that are 13 and below or 13 and above, et cetera, et cetera. And that label is often defined by the company itself. And so you're basically taking the word of the company that says, hey, our content's great, Mom, like, don't worry about it, let your kids sign up. And I would, not to be negative, but as someone who studies this and has studied this for a fair amount of time, once I got exposed to and got to read proprietary documents of the biggest companies in the country and what content they think is problematic, my tobacco line of inquiry is quite lower on the the risk profile. Like the stuff that the companies know that are on this platform that your kids are exposed to is wildly inappropriate and wildly problematic. So even when you're thinking you have a very clear idea of what your kid is doing online, and it's not to say that your kid is doing something nefarious, it's to say that there is a lot of nefarious content that they can stumble upon, oftentimes without having any kind of agency whatsoever. So just be very mindful of all of the variables that take place, from your phone to the app to the legal agreements that you're signing off on and to the parental linking, because all these things are kind of marketed towards mom and dad. They're like, we got you. Here's a parental link that we're going to make you feel good about because now you have oversight, and just trust us. But you know, it's a little bit of sleight of hand. So that's kind of something that I want to bring your attention to.
Thanks, John. Josh?
I'll say quickly, since this is a research conference, that I'll just echo what Jennifer said at the beginning of this, which is we need a lot more research on how advertising is impacting kids. And we need people who are studying how things like social media are impacting kids to include the business incentives and the commercial imperatives and how these platforms are designed in that research. I think far too often we treat, in research, we treat online platforms as just sort of these things that exist and not that are built for the benefit of advertisers, and I think that's really important. The other thing I'll just say real quickly, we need regulations. Self-regulation has failed when it comes to food and beverage marketing, it's failed when it comes to tobacco marketing, it's failed in every town. There's never been an industry that has successfully self-regulated itself. We need things like the Children's Online, the update to COPPA, and other regulations to protect kids from really exploitative marketing.
Yeah, to John's point, I have 3 boys at home, 6, 4, and 2, and I was getting something out of the oven, and I threw them, YouTube on my phone so they would be occupied and not come near the oven. I came back, and they had moved from like Elsa to a animated video of Spider-Man executing people, and they did not seem alarmed. They didn't come over and say, Mom, something scary is happening. I just came across it. So the idea that your kids are seeing things, and unless you come across it in the moment, you often do not know, which was terrifying. And I would agree about the policy piece, and that applies to all of us. Even if you're not a researcher, you're not a policymaker, you can always, in all your talks and all your advocacy, say, yes, we want to do X, Y, and Z. We also need stronger policy regulations. And I think Josh's work is a really good example. Fair Play is a great place to go and look and see what's going on in this area so that you can talk knowledgeably about always advocating for policy so that it makes it easier for parents to help their kids be safe online. Because it's not enough to just teach the kids to be safe online. They'll get into this stuff anyway.
And I think I'll build on all that bit by saying, through the American Academy of Pediatrics work that I'm doing as chair of Council on Communications and Media and through the Center of Excellence on Social Media and Youth Mental Health, it sometimes feels hypocritical to be telling families to work harder, to monitor all this and help their kids resist it when the system itself is actively working against that a lot of the time. And so it has to be multimodal, right? So the AAP does support updates to COPPA, Kids Online Safety Act, because we need to make some of these designs healthier by default, more private by default, and there need to be some new metrics that companies are working towards that revolve how kids are experiencing their products rather than the metrics that they're optimizing for right now are like quarterly earnings calls. So, but when it comes to the work we're doing with the Center of Excellence, we are doing a lot of trying to help families talk about this in ways that don't feel panicky, judgmental, very pragmatic, very strengths-based. So it could be, tell me, what do you think YouTube knows about you? Kids want to talk about this stuff and they're curious, and with the right sort of scaffolding, they can come to some conclusions like, I think, yeah, it probably knows I'm a boy. Maybe it knows how old I am. Do you think it knows what you like? Do you think, what do you think is so unique about you that is something you want private and it knows about you? Like, those are the sorts of things that kids have these certain conceptualizations about privacy as very interpersonal. Like, I don't want them coming in my bedroom. I don't want them knowing where I live. And those are the sorts of things they're not really understanding about the way inferences are made about them. So I regularly, if you have boys, I talk about, like, you're gonna be targeted for pornography. Like, you're going to, if you are a kid who loves, like, Pokemon and Magic the Gathering and other things like that, like, you're probably gonna get some sports betting and gambling sort of ads. You know, if you're a girl who loves beauty makeovers and other stuff like that, you might get extreme dieting ads. And helping kids just build that sort of defensive resilience about, yeah, this is the way that marketing works, and I'm just helping you be savvy about it. And by the age, I'd say, of like 8 and up, of course, talk about it all through childhood, but by the ages of 8 and up, kids really kind of want to feel savvy, and they want to feel like, you know, oh, that seems wrong, or they have these kind of new moral judgments about what is okay and what's not okay in terms of their privacy.
Okay, thank you. Well, I learned a lot at this panel, and I want to thank you all for really great insights. And I think we have almost 10 minutes for questions, if people have any.
That's awesome.
You guys are awesome. Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, my name is Jess Navarro. I'm a professor at Elon University, North Carolina. I'm also a mom to 3 kids, under 14 now. But one of the things that fascinated me last year when I went to go vote was that my child knew all the jingles. They came with me. And then they started telling me about how one of them had cheated on their wife and had an illegitimate baby, but the other candidate had committed fraud. And I was like, where are you seeing this? And they're seeing it on YouTube. So, you know, they're not 18. They're 9, 11, and 14 now. So I'm just interested, as the political season comes upon us, sort of what are your thoughts about political advertisements and why they're being targeted to kids online, and how that's shaping their perceptions of our political reality?
I have a few thoughts about that. So we did our first YouTube study with Common Sense Media in 2020, and we were collecting data in Michigan. So it was a swing state, and we were signed out of our Chrome browsers. We were trying to make it as much incognito as possible, but it was, we got tons of political ads, and some of them a bit like panicky or scary, and we got ads about, you know, should all illegal immigrants be deported, and other things that all are in the Common Sense report. And I think my answer was, number one, on YouTube specifically, you have to say you're made for kids in order to not have adult-directed ads show up there. And that's an issue that was also just recently brought to light in a recent New York Times expose. The other issue is that the ad distribution networks are sloppy and automated. And so when we look at ads showing up in kids' apps, they're all over the place. They're all different sorts of content, and no one's really looking at the ad distribution networks. And because they're automated, there's no real feedback as to whether that was viewed by a child versus not. So I'd love to hear what other people think of that.
Yeah, I mean, I would basically just agree with what Jenny just said. I mean, I think there's a couple things at work. One is that, you know, there has been a very deliberate marketing strategy to target kids with adult products, and you know, to cultivate the nag factor. You know, so you see things like cars and vacations being increasingly marketed to kids, so they will lobby their parents for that. I don't know if that's what's going on in terms of political ads. There is a huge amount of really bad targeted advertising online, and particularly on YouTube. And advertisers are actually getting ripped off left and right by Google. They're scared to say anything about it because Google is a monopoly and is the only game in town really to advertise. But a lot of, you know, sometimes it's, as advocates or researchers, it's really hard to tell like what is deliberately going after kids for adult products versus what is just really sloppy targeting by Google.
Over here.
Hi. I just want to say thank you. What a wonderful panel, everybody. I'm Tamara Sobel from Media Literacy Now, and I just wanted to make a comment really about the scope of the recommendations. I believe it is multimodal, a problem that has to be addressed for many ways, but nobody seemed to mention media literacy and as a really important aspect of this. It's not as sort of racy, and it's certainly not as instant, but I think we really need to invest in media literacy and health education. That's something that we're doing. Kids do want to know, one of the panelists said, it's not enough in terms of safety, and that's true, but the research shows that kids are really engaged in learning about how they're being duped. So that really has traction, particularly for young adolescents and adolescents. So we do find that there's a lot of interest when kids learn about what are the economic motives behind the products that they're being being pushed into their faces. So I think it's really engaging for students. We advocate that it's got to be standard in school, particularly in health education, and we're doing a lot on that front. So I'm on the next session, so if anyone wants to talk to me about, or catch me sometime. But thank you, this has been a really great panel.
Thank you. I'd love to chat more about this because I think, at least when it comes to advertising, I know in yesterday's panel we were talking about sort of sexting. This is the only conference I've been to where it's like sexting, pornography, advertising, so it's been really interesting and eye-opening. And I think there was a lot of discussion there around media literacy and sort of equipping people on how to have those conversations. The really scary thing with advertising is you can be incredibly media savvy, have really strong media literacy training. You're still affected by the ads. So you could have a kid who is really, knows that they're being targeted, knows that the point is to sell it to them. Yeah. It still works. It's the reason these companies have, $14 billion in advertising budgets each year, as Jennifer and the Rudd Center have pulled together. Yeah. So they know that we're influenced sort of regardless of a lot of factors that we're aware of in our mind.
Yeah, but we're too early to have done really implementing media literacy from early age onward, particularly in schools. So I think we're not at the place yet where we've set the foundation for the right mindset. But
yeah,
that's
I'd
just
love to chat more about it,
Sure.
because I think my concern is if we can't get media, even if adults are affected and they know, we know.
But they don't really know.
And well, I know like Pepsi's trying to sell me, an ad. So, but it would be neat because if we could sort of combine the strength of advertising with the strength of media literacy, I think that would be really interesting. I would love to chat more and look forward to your talk.
Sure, thank you.
Anyone else?
Hi, I'm Laurel Cook. I'm in the College of Business, and so I was particularly happy to hear Marie mention her appointment with NYU. I think that's fantastic. There are a small but growing number of us business people who want to work with experts outside of our disciplines, so I'm very encouraged by your work. I will say to the parents in the room, if you want to know what Google knows about you, YouTube, of course, is a Google property. I would definitely encourage you today to find out what ad settings are under each profile for your account. So definitely get on that. But my question is, Josh, I was really very pleased. I'm trying not to gush. I follow all of Fairplay's social media. So speaking of marketing well, you guys do marketing very well. Your social media is outstanding. And I'm really, so you get kudos for that. But I do want to see, many of you have mentioned this thing called native advertising, digital, like targeted ads, things like that. But what downstream outcomes are really kind of great concern to you? So, for example, yesterday we heard a lot about mental health related issues, but as a business person who's trying to solve the problem from the inside out, so I'm teaching today's marketers what not to do. And I'm really, I feel like I'm obligated to see what is of concern to you.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for the kind words, and I will pass it on to our social media person. I think there are different types of effects that I'm concerned about. So I'm concerned about childhood obesity and eating disorders and body image issues. I'm concerned about materialism. So there's a huge body of research that exposure to advertising makes kids more materialistic and gives them a worldview that it's going to be products and things that are going to lead to a fulfilling life, when in fact the opposite is true. It's relationships and community that leads to and good work that leads to a fulfilling life. So there's that, but then there's also, like what I was talking about, there's the mental health effects of how these platforms are designed. It's like, I don't think we can I think we need to move beyond studying advertising as a discrete ad or discrete marketing campaign, and we need to really think about how is this entire commercial system of data collection, of targeted content and targeted advertising and complete blurring of what's programming and what is advertising, what is that doing to children? What is that doing to teens? And those are, I'm not a researcher. I have no idea how you study that. But those are the kinds of questions that I think we need to be asking more broadly than just like, I think we need to understand what is the effect of looking at soda ads, but I think we need to ask deeper questions about how this system is designed and what are the impacts on children who are spending 8, 10, 12 hours a day in these commercial environments.
Do we have time for one more question? Sorry.
Thank you.
No more questions. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
It was a great audience. You're a great audience.